My daughter called me at 2:30 in the morning. I remember the exact moment because I was awake, sitting at my kitchen table with a mug of cold coffee I'd forgotten to drink. The house was quiet in that way it only gets when the rest of the world is asleep and your thoughts are louder than anything else. When my phone lit up with her name, my first thought wasn't fear. It was confusion. My daughter never called that late. Never. I answered on the second ring. "Dad," she whispered. Her voice was wrong. Not just tired. Not just upset. It sounded thin, like it might snap if she pushed it any harder. "Hey," I said, already standing up. "What's going on?" There was a pause. I could hear her breathing, shallow and uneven. Then she said it. "Dad, please, come get me." Something crashed in the background. Glass, maybe. Then a man's voice, sharp and irritated, cut through the line. I couldn't make out the words, but I didn't need to. I knew that tone. I'd heard it before, years ago, when my own father used it on my mother right before things got ugly. "Sweetheart," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Where are you?" I can't talk," she said. "Please. Just come. I'm scared." The call dropped. I stood there for half a second, staring at the dark screen in my hand, waiting for it to light up again. It didn't. My heart started beating so hard I could feel it in my throat. I didn't stop to think. Thinking wastes time. I grabbed my keys, my jacket, and the old habit I never fully broke, my phone charger, already in my pocket like a reflex. My daughter had been married for 1.5 years. Her husband came from money. Old money. The kind that doesn't brag, doesn't post, doesn't need to prove anything. Their house sat behind iron gates on a hill outside town, the kind of place you only ever saw in real estate magazines or crime documentaries. I'd been there twice. Both times, I'd left with a headache and a strange feeling I couldn't explain. Her mother-in-law smiled too much. Her smile never reached her eyes. The drive usually took 40 minutes. I did it in 26. I don't remember the road. I remember the pressure in my chest and the way my hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my fingers went numb. Every red light felt like an insult. Every slow car in front of me felt personal. I kept replaying her voice in my head. "Please. Come get me." When I reached the gates, they were already open. That should have scared me more than it did. Instead, it made me angry. They were expecting me. They knew she'd called. The house was lit up like it was hosting a party. Every window glowed. I parked crooked in the driveway and took the steps 2 at a time. I knocked once, hard enough to rattle the door in its frame. No answer. I knocked again, harder. The door opened just enough for a face to appear. Her mother-in-law stood there in a silk robe, hair perfectly in place, like she'd been awake all night waiting for company. She looked past me, then back at my face, her expression calm and annoyed in equal measure. "It's very late," she said. "I know what time it is," I said. "My daughter called me. I'm here to take her home." Her lips pressed together in a thin line. "She's not leaving." The way she said it, flat, final, sent a cold wave through me. "That's not your decision," I said. "Open the door." "She's had an episode," she replied. "She's confused. Emotional. It's best if she stays where she is." I stepped closer. "If you don't open that door right now, I will." She sighed, like I was a child being unreasonable. "Please don't make this difficult." I didn't answer. I stepped back and drove my shoulder into the door just below the lock. Wood splintered. The chain snapped. The door flew open, and she stumbled backward with a startled cry. "What are you doing?" she shouted. "This is trespassing." "Where is my daughter?" I said. She started shouting for someone, her husband, maybe, or one of the staff. I didn't wait to find out. I heard something from upstairs. A muffled sound. A cry that stopped abruptly, like someone had covered a mouth. I ran. The house was massive, all polished floors and artwork I didn't recognize. I followed the sound up the stairs, past a hallway that smelled faintly of disinfectant. The last door on the left was locked. I could hear breathing on the other side. "Emily," I said, pounding on it. "It's Dad. Open the door." "I can't," she whispered from inside. "Please." I kicked the door once. It held. I kicked it again. The frame cracked. On the third kick, the door burst open. The room didn't look like a bedroom. Not really. The furniture was expensive, but the windows were sealed shut. There were straps bolted to the bed frame, neatly tucked away like they were part of the design. The air smelled wrong, chemical, sharp. Emily was sitting on the floor in a thin nightshirt, her knees pulled to her chest. She looked smaller than I remembered. Too thin. Her eyes were unfocused, darting toward the door behind me like she expected someone to come through it at any second. When she lifted her arms, I felt something inside me break. There were marks. Not random. Not messy. Perfect circles, lined up along her forearms. Some were red and angry. Others were pale scars. Someone had done this carefully. Over time. "Oh God," I said, dropping to my knees beside her. "Baby." She collapsed into me, shaking. "I told them I wanted to leave," she sobbed. "They said I wasn't well enough. They said no one would believe me." "Who did this to you?" I asked. She hesitated, then whispered, "They said it was treatment." Footsteps thundered in the hallway. Her husband appeared in the doorway, eyes bloodshot, jaw tight. Behind him were two other men I recognized vaguely from family gatherings. All of them blocked the exit. "You need to leave," he said. "You're making this worse." "You drugged her," I said, standing up slowly, keeping Emily behind me. "You hurt her." "She's unstable," he replied calmly. "She does this to herself. We're trying to help." I laughed. It came out sharp and ugly. "You think I'm stupid?" One of the men stepped forward. "Sir, please." I didn't wait for him to finish. I grabbed Emily, slung her arm over my shoulder, and moved. Someone grabbed at me, but adrenaline makes you stronger than you think. I shoved past them, nearly tripping on the stairs, ignoring the shouting behind me. I got her into the car and drove. She faded in and out of consciousness on the way to the hospital. I kept talking to her, telling her stupid stories from when she was a kid, anything to keep her with me. When we pulled into the emergency entrance, nurses rushed out with a wheelchair. They took her from me. I sat in the waiting room for hours, staring at the same spot on the wall, replaying everything I'd seen. When the doctor finally came out, his face was grim. "She's stable," he said. "But there are substances in her system that concern us." "What substances?" I asked. He listed them. Medications she'd never been prescribed. Combinations that made no sense. "We've contacted law enforcement," he added. Good, I thought. Let them explain this. The police showed up an hour later. I told them everything. The call. The door. The room. The marks on her arms. They listened, took notes, nodded. I couldn't tell what they believed. By the time the sun came up, her in-laws' lawyers had already issued a statement. They painted Emily as mentally ill. Me as unstable. They said I'd broken into their home in the middle of the night and assaulted their family. They got out on bail that afternoon. Emily stayed in the hospital for 3 days. When she was strong enough to talk, she told me everything. How they'd started giving her pills for anxiety. How they documented every reaction, every protest. How they told her she was sick, broken, dangerous to herself. They said if I tried to leave, she whispered, they'd have me committed. I believed her. I started digging. I'd spent most of my life fixing things with my hands. I wasn't a detective. I wasn't a lawyer. But I knew how to ask questions, and I knew how to listen. I found former employees who wouldn't go on record but hinted at incidents. I found families who'd lost contact with loved ones after they married into the same circle. Patterns emerged. Always the same story. Someone tried to leave. Someone questioned things. Then something happened. When the arrests finally came, they were quiet. No sirens. No cameras. Just handcuffs and closed doors. The trial took over a year. Emily testified. Her voice shook, but she didn't back down. The jury listened. The evidence piled up. When the verdict was read, I held her hand so tightly my knuckles ached. They were found guilty. Years later, Emily still wakes up some nights from dreams where she's locked in that room again. I still keep my phone on loud when I sleep. Some habits never go away. If you're a parent, ask yourself this: what would you do if your child called you in the middle of the night, terrified, and no one would let them leave? I didn't hesitate. And I never will again. I thought the verdict would bring closure. That once the judge spoke and the doors closed behind them, the weight would lift and life would slowly return to something resembling normal. I was wrong. Justice doesn't erase trauma. It only names it. Emily came home with me after the trial. Not to the house she'd grown up in, that one held too many memories of who she used to be, but to a small place near the water, where mornings smelled like salt and evenings were quiet. The first few weeks, she barely slept. Every creak of the floor made her sit bolt upright. Every unexpected knock made her flinch. I learned to announce myself when I entered a room. I learned to move slower. I learned that healing doesn't happen on a schedule. One night, about a month after the trial ended, she came into the kitchen while I was washing dishes. She stood there for a long time before speaking. "They told me you wouldn't come," she said. I turned off the faucet. "Who did?" "Her. My mother-in-law. She said if I ever tried to call you, you wouldn't believe me. She said you were obsessed with control, that you liked playing the hero more than being a father." Emily swallowed. For a while, I started wondering if she was right. That hurt more than anything else she'd told me. "I should have trusted my instincts sooner," I said. "I should have listened when you sounded unhappy. I let myself believe the version of your life they showed me." She shook her head. "They were good at it. Everyone believed them." That was the part that haunted me. Not just what they did to my daughter, but how easily the world accepted it. Money, polish, reputation. All the right words in the right order. People like that don't need to threaten you. They let the system do it for them. Emily started therapy. Real therapy. Her therapist was a woman in her 40s with a gentle voice and sharp eyes who never rushed her and never told her how she was supposed to feel. Progress came in inches, not miles. Some days were good. Others felt like setbacks. I learned not to measure healing by productivity. Just by honesty. The letters started arriving a few months later. The first one was short. No return address. Just a name and a story. A man in Ohio whose sister had married into a family with connections. A woman in California whose son had disappeared into a private wellness retreat and come out unrecognizable. A grandmother in Florida who said her grandson had been declared mentally unstable after questioning his business partner's finances. Different states. Same patterns. I didn't show Emily at first. I didn't want to drag her back into that darkness. But she found one of the letters on the kitchen table one afternoon while I was out. When I came home, she was sitting on the couch with it folded in her hands. "You're not done," she said quietly. "No," I admitted. "I'm not." She looked up at me. Her eyes were clearer than they'd been in a long time. "Neither am I." That's how the support group started. Not as some big plan. Just a handful of people in a borrowed church basement on Tuesday nights. Survivors. Families. People who'd been told they were crazy, unstable, unreliable. People who'd been locked in rooms, sometimes literal, sometimes not. Emily didn't speak much at first. She listened. She nodded. She cried when others cried. Then one night, when a young woman across the circle said, "I still don't know if what happened to me was real," Emily leaned forward. "It was," she said. "I know because the same thing happened to me." The room went quiet. That was the moment I realized something important. Saving your child doesn't always mean pulling them out of danger. Sometimes it means standing back and letting them turn pain into purpose. The threats never really stopped. They became subtler. Anonymous emails. Comments left on old photos. A car that followed me a little too long one afternoon. I documented everything. I always have. Fear loses power when you shine a light on it. One evening, almost exactly a year after that phone call, Emily and I sat on the porch watching the sun dip into the water. She had a blanket around her shoulders and a cup of tea in her hands. She looked peaceful. Not untouched, not unchanged, but present. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked suddenly. "Regret what?" "Breaking in. Kicking down the door. Starting all of this." I thought about it. The splintering wood. The look on her face when she saw me. The courtroom. The scars that would never fully fade. "No," I said. "I regret waiting." She nodded. "Me too. There's a lie we tell ourselves as parents. That love is quiet. That respectability keeps us safe. That if something is wrong, someone else will notice first. Someone with authority. Someone with credentials. That's not how it works. Evil doesn't announce itself. It dresses well. It speaks softly. It tells you it knows better than you do. And it relies on one thing more than anything else: your hesitation. If you take anything from this story, let it be this: trust the voice that tells you something is wrong. Especially when it comes from your child. Especially when the people standing in your way look powerful and calm and certain. When my daughter called me at 2:30 in the morning, terrified and trapped, I didn't have a plan. I didn't know how it would end. I only knew one thing. She needed me. And sometimes, that's all you need to know. Years have passed since that night, but time doesn't put distance between you and moments like that. It just teaches you how to carry them. Some mornings I wake up and, for a split second, everything feels normal. Then it hits me, the memory of her voice, thin and shaking through a phone speaker in the dark. I don't fight it anymore. I let it remind me why I stay alert. Why I stay involved. Why I never assume everything is fine just because someone says it is. Emily moved into her own place last spring. It's small, bright, and filled with plants she somehow keeps alive despite insisting she has no idea what she's doing. She laughs more now. Not the polite laugh she learned around people she didn't trust, but the kind that sneaks up on her and surprises even herself. She still has scars. Some visible. Some not. But she doesn't hide them. On the anniversary of the trial's end, she invited me over for dinner. She cooked, burned the first batch of food, laughed about it, and ordered takeout instead. Halfway through the meal, she reached across the table and took my hand. "You saved my life," she said. I shook my head. "You saved yourself. I just showed up." "No," she said firmly. "You believed me." That's when I understood something I wish I'd learned earlier in life. Belief is an action. It's not passive. It's not quiet. When you believe someone who is afraid, you step into their fear with them. You accept the consequences. You risk being wrong. You risk being judged. And that risk can change everything. The letters still come, though less frequently now. Sometimes they're just thank you notes from people Emily helped through the group. Sometimes they're from parents who say they heard our story and checked in on a son or daughter they hadn't spoken to in months. Sometimes they're warnings. I read them all. I answer the ones that ask for help. I pass the others along to people who know what to do with them. I've been asked why I keep going. Why I don't move on. The truth is, I have moved on, just not away. I moved forward, carrying what I learned. Once you see how easily systems can be bent, how quickly voices can be dismissed, you can't unsee it. And once you know what happens when someone finally stands up, you can't justify staying silent. Emily spoke at a small conference last year. She stood at a podium in front of a room full of strangers and told them what it felt like to be locked in a place that claimed it was helping her. She talked about doubt. About shame. About how hard it was to trust her own mind again. When she finished, the room was silent for a long moment. Then people stood. Not cheering. Not clapping wildly. Just standing. Acknowledging. Afterward, she found me near the back. I was scared, she admitted. I know, I said. But I did it anyway. Yes, you did. On the drive home, she stared out the window for a while before speaking again. Dad, she said. If I ever have kids, I want to be the kind of parent who shows up like you did. I didn't answer right away. My throat tightened. Just remember, I said finally, showing up doesn't always look heroic. Sometimes it just looks like listening when it's inconvenient. Or believing when it's uncomfortable. That night, the one that started all of this, didn't turn me into a hero. It reminded me of my responsibility. To my child. To the truth. To the quiet voice that says something isn't right, even when everyone else insists it is. So if you're listening to this and something feels off in your life, in your family, in the people you love, don't ignore it. Don't wait for proof that's neat and undeniable. Don't let politeness override protection. Ask the extra question. Make the late-night drive. Knock on the door. Kick it down if you have to. Because sometimes the difference between losing someone and saving them is a single decision made in the dark, guided by nothing more than love and the refusal to look away. I don't know what the future holds. None of us do. But I know this, if my phone rings at 2:30 in the morning again, and I see my daughter's name on the screen, I won't hesitate. I'll already be reaching for my keys. I used to think stories ended when the danger was gone. When the bad people were locked away and the door finally stayed open. But life doesn't work like that. Stories like this don't end. They settle. They echo. They change the shape of the people who lived through them. A few weeks after Emily moved into her new place, she called me in the middle of the afternoon. Not crying. Not panicked. Just quiet. Dad, she said, can I ask you something without you trying to fix it? I smiled to myself. I'll try. Do you ever wonder, she said slowly, how many people never get the call answered? The question hit harder than I expected. I do, I admitted. More than I'd like. She was silent for a moment. Then she said, that's why I can't just pretend it's over. Neither could I. We don't talk about the long tail of fear. The way it sneaks up on you when you least expect it. How safety doesn't feel like safety for a long time. Emily once froze in the grocery store because someone stood too close behind her in line. Another time she left a restaurant in tears because a waiter touched her shoulder without warning. None of that made her weak. It made her human. I learned to stop saying things like, "You're safe now." Because safety isn't a switch. It's a muscle. You rebuild it slowly. One evening, she asked me to sit with her while she went through an old box of things she'd taken from the house she escaped. Clothes. A notebook. Jewelry she'd never worn. At the bottom was her phone from that night. The screen was cracked. The case scuffed. I haven't turned it on since, she said. You don't have to. I want to. She powered it up. Notifications flooded the screen. Missed calls. Messages. Voicemails. Most from me. Some from friends she hadn't been allowed to see. One from her mother-in-law, sent hours after I took her away. I didn't read it. Emily did. She wrote, Emily said quietly, "You're making a terrible mistake. You'll come crawling back when you realize how sick you really are." Emily locked the phone and set it aside. For a long time, she said, I thought maybe she was right. That maybe I was broken. I looked at my daughter, stronger than she knew, scarred but standing, and felt something settle in my chest. They needed you to believe that, I said. Because once you trust yourself, they lose everything. She nodded. That's the part no one tells you. Abuse like that isn't just about control of the body. It's about control of the story. Who gets to define what's real? Who gets to decide whether your fear is valid or convenient to dismiss? Months later, Emily met a young man through the support group. Just coffee at first. Then walks. Then laughter I heard from the next room when she thought I wasn't listening. She was cautious. So was I. A trust is earned twice after it's broken, once by the person offering it, and once by the person learning to accept it again. One night after he left, she said, I told him everything. And? I asked. He didn't flinch, she said. He didn't try to explain it away. He just said, I'm sorry that happened to you. I exhaled. That's a good sign. She smiled. I thought so too. I still keep a small bag by the door. Old habit. Flashlight. Charger. Keys always in the same place. Emily teases me about it. You know you don't have to be on standby forever, she says. I know, I tell her. But I choose to be. Because love doesn't stop being vigilant just because things are calm. Love remembers how quickly calm can break. Every once in a while, someone will recognize me. They'll say they heard the story. They'll shake my hand and tell me I'm brave. I thank them, but it never feels right. Brave implies choice without fear. I was terrified. I just refused to let that stop me. If you're listening to this and wondering whether you'd do the same, here's the truth, you don't know until the moment comes. But you can decide now what kind of person you want to be when it does. Decide that you'll answer the call. Decide that you'll believe the voice on the other end. Decide that you won't let politeness, fear, or reputation stand between you and someone you love. Because when my daughter called me at 2:30 in the morning and said, Dad, come get me, the world narrowed down to a single, undeniable truth. Nothing mattered more than getting to her. And nothing ever will. There's a moment that stays with me more than any courtroom verdict or slammed door. It's quieter than all of that. It happened about a year after everything, on an ordinary Sunday morning. Emily and I were sitting at the small diner down the street from her apartment. The kind of place where the coffee is too strong and the waitress calls everyone Han. Sunlight poured through the front windows, catching dust in the air. Nothing dramatic. Nothing important, at least not on the surface. She was telling me about a class she was thinking of taking. Something creative. Something just for her. Halfway through her sentence, she stopped. Her eyes drifted to the door as it opened. A man walked in, mid-40s, loud laugh, confident stride. He didn't look like anyone we knew. He wasn't doing anything wrong. But I saw her shoulders tense. Her breath shortened. I didn't say a word. I just shifted slightly closer and rested my hand on the table where she could see it. She noticed. Took a breath. Let it out slowly. A minute later, she went on talking like nothing had happened. That's when it hit me. This is what survival looks like. Not fear disappearing. Not forgetting. But learning how to move forward even when the body remembers. After breakfast, as we stood outside waiting to cross the street, she said, Thank you. For what? For not asking if I'm okay every 5 minutes. I smiled. You taught me. She laughed. And for the first time, it didn't sound careful. People sometimes ask me how I knew something was wrong that night. The truth is, I didn't have proof. I didn't have evidence. I didn't have a plan. All I had was a voice on the phone that didn't sound like my daughter anymore. We're taught to demand certainty before we act. To wait until we can explain ourselves clearly. To avoid making scenes. But certainty is a luxury most victims don't have. By the time things are obvious, it's often too late. I've replayed that night 1,000 times in my head. The way her mother-in-law said, "She's not leaving," like it was a statement of fact instead of a choice. The locked door. The room that pretended to be safe while hiding cruelty in plain sight. If I had hesitated, if I'd told myself I was overreacting, if I'd worried about how it would look, if I'd waited for morning, my daughter might not be here today. That's a heavy thing to live with. But it's also a gift. Because it taught me something worth passing on. If someone you love sounds afraid, believe them. If something feels wrong, trust that feeling. If the people in power tell you to stay quiet, ask yourself who benefits from your silence. You don't need permission to protect your child. You don't need credentials to knock on a door. You don't need certainty to act on love. Emily still calls me sometimes late at night. Not because she's scared. Sometimes just because she can't sleep and wants to talk. Those calls don't make my heart race anymore. They make me smile. But my phone is still on. Always. Because the lesson of that night never leaves you. Being a parent doesn't end when your child grows up. It doesn't end when they move out. It doesn't end when they say they're fine. It ends when you stop answering the call. And I never will. Even now, when the house is quiet and the world feels still, I sometimes sit alone and think about how close I came to missing it. Not the call, I answered that, but everything before it. The subtle changes. The forced smiles. The way Emily stopped sharing details about her life and started offering summaries instead. We're good. Everything's fine. I'm just tired. Those words sound harmless until you hear them through the echo of regret. I think about all the times I almost asked more questions and didn't. All the moments I told myself I didn't want to interfere. I mistook distance for respect. I confused silence with peace. That's a mistake a lot of parents make, especially when their children grow up and build lives of their own. We're told to step back. To trust the process. To let go. But letting go doesn't mean looking away. Emily once told me that the worst part of what she went through wasn't the fear or the pain. It was the loneliness. The feeling that even if she screamed, no one would hear her, or worse, they'd hear her and decide she was the problem. That's what systems like that rely on. Isolation. Doubt. The slow erosion of trust in your own instincts. I've learned that evil rarely looks like rage. It looks like authority. It looks like calm explanations and reasonable tones. It tells you it knows better. It tells you you're emotional. It tells you to sit down and let the experts handle it. And if you listen, it takes everything. Emily doesn't talk much about forgiveness. People ask her about it all the time, like it's some final step she's supposed to reach. She usually shrugs and says, "I'm more interested in freedom." I understand that now. Freedom is waking up and choosing what to wear without someone commenting on your stability. Freedom is making a mistake without it being added to a file. Freedom is calling your father at 2:30 in the morning and knowing he'll come, no questions asked. Sometimes I wonder who I would be if that night had gone differently. If I'd waited. If I'd believed the polite lies instead of the trembling truth in my daughter's voice. I don't like that version of myself. He sleeps better, maybe. He keeps the peace. But he lives with a silence that never quite goes away. I'd rather live tired and alert than rested and regretful. Emily keeps that old phone now. The one with the cracked screen. She says it reminds her of two things: how bad it got, and how quickly everything can change when someone shows up. She doesn't look at the messages anymore. She doesn't need to. The phone did its job. Every so often, she'll catch me checking my phone late at night and roll her eyes. "You know I'm okay," she says. "I know," I reply. But knowing didn't save you. Acting did. She doesn't argue with that. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this: love isn't proven in grand speeches or perfect timing. It's proven in inconvenient moments. In middle of the night drives. In doors you're afraid to open. In the choice to believe someone even when doing so costs you comfort, reputation, or peace of mind. When my daughter called me at 2:30 in the morning and said, "Dad, come get me," she wasn't just asking for a ride. She was asking a question every child asks in their own way sooner or later. Will you come when I need you most? I answered that question once. And as long as I'm breathing, I'll keep answering it again. There are nights now when I sleep all the way through until morning. That didn't happen for a long time. When it does, I wake up with a strange mix of gratitude and caution, like someone who knows calm is precious because they've lived without it. Emily still checks in. Sometimes it's a text. Sometimes it's a call. Sometimes it's just a photo of something ordinary, a sunset, a messy room, a burned dinner she's laughing about. Every time my phone lights up with her name, I feel the same quiet relief. Not fear anymore. Relief. Because I know she's alive. I know she's free. I know she trusts her voice again. I think about that night often, not because I want to relive it, but because it reminds me who I chose to be when it mattered. Not a perfect father. Not a fearless one. Just a present one. If you take anything from this story, let it be this: don't wait for certainty when someone you love is afraid. Certainty is rare. Fear is real. And silence is where the worst things grow. When someone calls you in the middle of the night and says, "Please, come get me," that is not the time to analyze, negotiate, or delay. That is the time to stand up, grab your keys, and move. Doors can be fixed. Reputations recover. Sleep returns. But missed chances don't. I answered the call at 2:30 in the morning. I broke the door. I brought my daughter home. And if I had to do it all again, knowing everything I know now, I wouldn't change a single step. Because being a parent isn't about keeping your child safe from the world. It's about going into the world when they can't do it alone. And I always will.